Hey guys, so today we're going to take another look at Jef Groff's E92. Last we left off was on the roll cage, but let's talk about the rear mount radiator today and how we did it and why we do a rear mount radiator, the benefits of that, and then also on top of that we have the rear firewall set up. So then we'll talk about why we do that and the specs on that and a little bit of the details on that stuff. So rear firewall is made of aluminum, 60 wall aluminum or 0.063. So that is FD spec, so we just do the minimum spec that they're asking for. No thinner, no thicker. The reason we don't go any thicker is because we don't want to add weight, unwanted weight I guess, and then we just make it up to spec so that it can pass tech if one day this became an FD drift car. I don't know the future of it. There is a 3-panel piece in the back there. It's removable. There's nut zerts behind these button head Allens that you see, so that's removable. Centerpiece, then there's each side. The side pieces most likely you're not going to take out, but if you had to take them out you'd have to undo these rivets, get that little piece out, and then you can unbolt it. Most likely it's never going to come out, there's no need for it. Behind there we have the dry sump tank. We'll show you that in a little bit. And then to fill the dry sump tank when it's time to change your oil, we have Zeus fastener, quarter turn Zeus fasteners. Remove that upper panel, so it's actually a 4-piece firewall that you have. Then back here is the radiator and the ductwork for the radiator. So the window will come right to the edge of here. We had the stock window on and off a couple times, and we measured and it's just kissing the stock window. That's a nut zert, so when this gets riveted on here, at the time of the Lexan window, that makes sense, the window will sit on that. That's what a nut zert looks like. It's just like a threaded rivet basically, so you can undo the bolt on top of it. The reason that we don't just leave an open hole is we do the ducting so that it'll get, you know, enough airflow so the car gets a good amount of fresh air. The fans do most of the work on a drift car because the back end is going back and forth, sideways, so you aren't going to get like solid airflow, but it obviously just helps a little bit. The fans are going to do most of the work. They're just going to pull through. These are some big fans. I think he has like 4,500 CFM with these fans. It's kind of a must with a drift car to have about 4,000 plus of CFM on your fans, otherwise you're going to run into overheating problems, because when you're at the track with a drift car, odds are that it's going to be 80 plus degrees, and then you're beating on it, have it near red line the whole time. So big fans are a must. A big dual pass radiator is also kind of necessary. You could get away with a single pass, but hardly ever is it going to sustain the abuse and keep your temps down. So dual pass is the way to go. And a dual pass means it goes in, there's a partition halfway through on that side. It goes in this side, goes across, falls down, comes out the same side that it went in. That's what dual pass means. And then there's dual core and dual pass. So this is a dual core, dual pass radiator from CBR. It's a pretty good one. This was used out of his previous car, but there was nothing wrong with it, so he just had us install it into this one. Also, when you're choosing a radiator, some radiators are going to have the conventional radiator cap on them, but in a race car application, more than half of the time, there is no cap on the radiator. It'll be a sealed radiator. It'll have a vent port on this side, a small hose about this size or a little bit bigger, like dash 6 AN line usually, and then from that you'll bleed the bubbles off of that to a higher mounted can that'll be called your expansion tank, or in some cases a swirl pot, which feeds the bubbles off of there. So we don't have one in this case, but it will be off to the side. I'll show you over on my Supra what an expansion tank is. And then at the bottom of the expansion tank, it'll feed back into the line coming out of the radiator or near that. And the expansion tank idea is to help get rid of bubbles coming off the top of your radiator and let it kind of settle down, and then it feeds back into your return line as it goes back to the motor. There's nothing to say that this isn't a good setup. This is a really good setup. It's just, if it did not have a radiator cap, we would have to mount an expansion tank back here. And the reason I said mount it up higher is because you want it to be higher than your motor, so that any air bubbles will go to the top with gravity to the very top of that expansion tank, and to get all the turbulence and the bubbles out, so that your motor is sealed with no bubbles. So let's quick walk over here to the Supra really quick, and I'll show you when the expansion tank is, and it's higher than the motor. This is an expansion tank and an overflow tank. So this, my radiator's out, but it would feed off of the radiator over here, feed into there, and it'll come out the bottom of here back into where your electric water pump would be. Or if you don't have an electric water pump, it'll try and feed into the return hose that goes to the motor. So hopefully that makes sense. If you guys have questions on any of that stuff, feel free to ask. We left room here in the back in case he wants to smack some walls. He's not going to take out his radiator. He has to really crash hard to get his radiator. So that's another reason why it's not all the way at the back, because drift cars always dragging their tail against walls, or trying to at least, and then sometimes you under or over calculate and you crunch the back of your car. The reason the radiator goes in the back, there's probably 3 reasons. Probably 3 reasons. Depends on the chassis and the car and the motor in the chassis. So reason number 1, it is out of the way of the temperature of the motor. If it's a turbo car, it's gonna have an intercooler. If it's not a turbo car, it still needs an oil cooler and a power steering cooler and a radiator. So, and then if it's supercharged, it needs another heat exchanger, which is like a small radiator just for the supercharger. So when lots of these cars are not just NA, so then they're gonna have all these other either heat exchangers, oil coolers, other coolers in the way. They're all gonna have a lot of heat going through them. So to separate the coolant one away from everything else helps keep the temperatures down, and it gives you a long run of hose to and from the back of the car, which in turn gives you way more coolant, and then that much more time it takes to process the coolant and cool it down, come back, so your car stays colder longer or never overheats and just runs optimal at 180 degrees. Doesn't matter what temperature it is outside, it's just gonna run exactly what you want it to. Other reason could be that, not that it's isolated away from everything else with heat, but that helps balance out the weight of the car. So then you have more of a 50-50 weight balance. And then third reason would be then the airflow is not going through all the coolers if you had them all stacked in the front. So there could be 4 reasons, I guess. And then the other reason would be that there just isn't physically enough room in the front of the car. If you put this big motor with all this extra stuff on it to make it, give you that horsepower, and you're crammed it into a small car, you probably don't have the room in the front to stack every single cooler. There's a good example of how much work it would be stacking all these coolers in front of it, one after another. And that doesn't even have an oil cooler. That's just radiator, a little tiny AC condenser, and an intercooler on that guy. And it's like packed. There's not enough room even for his bumper. You're gonna have to cut up the bumper to barely get it on there. So those are the reasons. And when you put a radiator in the back, odds are you're gonna have to run an electric water pump that has 55 gallons per minute or close to that to be able to get it to flow that length. Because 55 gallons per minute is probably the optimal of the pump that you buy that claims it does 55 gallons per minute, but then you put it in a small hose, like a 1 1/4, 1.5 inch ID hose, or AN line or hard line, whatever it is that you build your car to have. It's gonna lose some of its efficiency on the way down, like the way to and from that pump. So minimum requirements, 55 gallon per minute water pump. There's a Stewart makes a pretty good one, and then Mazier makes a pretty good one. Those are the two I would recommend if you guys are gonna do this. And then make sure your fans have the right amount of CFM and you're good to go. If you were to just throw the radiator in the back and hope that your OEM water pump could handle it, it's probably not. GM LS water pumps is the only one that will do it. All the other ones are gonna be not enough gallons per minute, and they're just gonna not be able to flow that distance and quantity of water, and then your car will overheat and you'll be like, wait, why is this rear mount radiator not working correctly? Because that's the reason. So keep in mind all those thoughts. Let's take a look at the dry sump tank. Dry sump tank, we're still gonna drill some holes in the firewall to have some of those hoses go in. So he'll have to reach in here, but he'll be on the inside of the car because there'll be a window up here, but that's how he will be. Let's go in here and do it. This is how he'll be accessing it. Won't be the easiest thing, but maybe once every couple months, because dry sump tank has about 3.5 to 4.5 gallons of oil through the whole system, and you're not gonna need to change your oil, you know, every time you drive the car because it has so much oil. But that is Jef Groff's rear firewall, dry sump tank setup, and his rear mount radiator and the duct work that we did. Next up, we're gonna be doing the motor mounts. Put the motor in, the trans and the motor mount, and then we will walk you guys through how we did that, why we do that the way we're doing it, and then why we chose the mounts that we are going to choose. And half of it's, you know, the owner of the car's choice, and then room for headers and some other stuff. So we'll get into that next episode. But let me know if you have any questions on this car or on the setup that we're doing. Maybe you're doing it to a different chassis and you might need help with a couple of the things, and just feel free to ask us. Or if you want to see more detail on something else on this particular car or another car, let us know. All right, don't forget, rad shirts are on our website, and stay tuned for the upcoming episodes. Talk to you guys later.